We live in a world right now where there is so much information coming at us constantly that it is very easy to forget things even when they're super important. Personally, I've grown up forgetting things constantly and always having too much on my mind. I've tried courses on focusing, courses on mindfulness as if that would really work. I've tried meditating, and I've also tried going to the doctors, and they wanted to see if I had ADHD because of how I described my lack of focus, but in the end, nothing worked. That was until I found a solution at the age of 18, and this process has allowed me to achieve amazing mental clarity in many different ways of my life, and I want to share that with you today. Daniel Levitin, a neuroscientist and the author of The Organized Mind, said, "The constant nagging in your mind of undone things pulls you out of the present, tethers you to a mindset of the future so that you are never fully in the moment and enjoying what is now." We've all forgotten that meeting or friend's birthday or just had a million things on our mind and felt overwhelmed, right? But what are we to do with so many distractions and information crowding our heads at all times? Because of devices that we have on us at all times that are constantly grabbing our attention. Now, while technology plays a huge role in how easy information overload can happen, it also plays a huge part in the solution, which is called externalizing. Externalizing information is probably something you're familiar with and do on a small scale at least, like putting your family member's birthday into your virtual calendar, or simply setting an alarm to wake up at a certain time. It is simply taking the information or thoughts in your head and moving them to the outside world, externalizing your fleeting thoughts onto something that can last forever, and when done right, or when you make it a habit, it can really make things change. Not only does this allow you to be more in the moment, but it also frees up your brain's mental RAM, where no longer does your brain have to remember exactly what that task or what that calendar date is, but instead just has to remember where that information is stored. There is so much you can do with today's calendar apps and to-do lists and notes apps that really helps with externalizing, but more importantly than the tools themselves, it is how you use them that really matters. I personally began externalizing information in my life after I read The Organized Mind 5 years ago, and it began with a written routine. I also put my entire schedule on Google Calendar at the time, with repeating dates for things like birthdays as well as my volunteering position at the time. The more and more I moved information from my head to the outside world, the more that I felt like my mind was becoming more and more clear. I started obsessing and I downloaded an app called Wunderlist, which is no longer available, to put everything that I needed to complete on there with completion dates into different folders. The more I did this, the more I found different reasons for backing up my thoughts, and I became captivated with the idea of documenting my life. That is my cat. I started writing down all the memories I had as a kid because I knew one day I was going to forget these things, and that meant a lot to me, to then documenting my life every single week into a personal journal. And I've continued doing so to this day, but instead of doing written work for my future family, I make videos because I feel like that's going to be a lot more interesting to watch. Yes, you're such a good girl. Now, not everybody is going to want to spend time putting all of their thoughts on paper or into a virtual device. In fact, I've even changed the way that I externalize information over the years because my lifestyle as well as my preferences have changed. But by finding a way that works for you, starting small and keeping organized throughout the entire process, you can start to notice some real big changes to mental clarity. Before we get into it, here are a few things to keep in mind. Don't externalize for the sake of externalizing, do it because it provides a benefit to your life. For example, adding a to-do into a to-do app means that you don't have to risk forgetting it, but at the same time, don't just have a ton of to-dos just because you want to seem busy, because you will become burnt out. Another thing to keep in mind is this is about progression, not perfection. Start small and slowly add to this as you see fit. It might seem necessary to jump in all at once and write down every last thought in your mind and add 100 different tasks to 5 different lists to 5 different folders. But like I experienced, that could cause you to become overwhelmed and disorganized, which defeats the entire purpose of externalizing. And finally, keep an open mind and adjust as you go by testing things out. You might think you prefer writing things down with a pencil or paper, or find out like me that you do much better having everything on your computer and your phone. Find out what works for you, ditch what doesn't, and go all in on what does. Now let's get into how to actually externalize. Here are my 5 steps. The first one is to plan. Start off by figuring out which tools you want to use, research things online to make sure that it would be the best suit for you, and then consider starting off with one thing. For me, I only use free apps for externalizing, and they'll be included in the description down below. I use Todoist for my to-do list, Google Calendar for my calendar, I use Apple Notes for notes, Google Drive for photos, videos, and documents, and finally Chronometer for what I eat. Also make sure to plan out what you want to externalize. Start brainstorming ideas on what tasks and events you have, and make sure you just start writing it all down. Step number 2 is to organize. Make sure that you figure out what kind of tools you want to use and then download them, get familiar with them, try them out a little bit, see how they work, and then from there, take all the to-dos, take all the events that you have, and organize them. And if relevant, put them into different folders or groups. For example, singular tasks versus routine tasks, singular events versus routine events, things that repeat in nature versus things that are independent and come at the last minute. Make sure that you organize them in a way that works for you. Routine to-dos or events are great because they take a minute to set up and then they're out of your hands and they're taken care of forever. One of the rules that I have for myself is information efficiency. If I have a to-do to walk the dog, for example, I don't also have a calendar event to walk the dog. It's one or the other. Step number 3 is to process and enter your information. Make sure you add your to-do list items into the relevant folders, add your calendar dates on your calendar, set up alarms for waking up in the morning, add them to the relevant apps that you want, or if you prefer pencil and paper, then just write them down. Also, make sure you have a process for dealing with new information coming in. Like if your mom calls you up and says, I want you to pick up some apples from the grocery store tomorrow, make it a habit to put that into your to-do list right away to minimize the amount that you have to remember at any given time and to maximize the amount that you get out of externalizing. Step number 4 is to automate. It is the gravy of this entire process. It is to set up reminders for things. It's to make sure that your to-do lists and to-do list items and events in your calendar that are repeating are all set up. For example, for me, I have a to-do list folder dedicated to routine items, and it's something where once it's set up, I don't ever touch it. The 5th and final step is to evaluate and adjust. It is the most important step if you want something like this to last. It is where you sit down after a couple weeks or a month, take some time and figure out what is working and what isn't working with your process. For example, if you find that virtual routines don't work for you after a couple of weeks, try writing a routine down instead, or try just scrapping it all together for now, focusing on to-dos and building your way up. Also, make sure to adjust things that change. For example, if your boss doesn't appreciate your sleep and all of a sudden says that you have to be in work 1 hour earlier every day from now on, then adjust that in your calendar and make those adjustments right away. And that is my strategy for externalizing information in 5 steps. If you follow these steps properly, you are well on your way to improving your mental clarity. Just make sure you follow the first few key pieces of advice that I have for you. 1, don't externalize for the sake of externalizing. 2, progression, not perfection. And number 3, make sure that you adjust as you go and keep an open mind. To be clear, the strategy is not about not having to think. It is about freeing up the burden of constantly having to think of multiple things at once that you could instead externalize. And to instead spend time thinking about more important things and also being able to remember those last minute things like turning off the oven when you leave the house. Let me know in the comments if you want me to expand on my experience with externalizing as well as how I externalize on a daily basis. Also, make sure to follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn. The links are in the description down below. Anyways, if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like and subscribing down below for more content. It really helps out this channel by telling the YouTube algorithm to share this video with more people. Stay well for now and stay practical. See you later.
Yeah, your heart is a sun and it shines as it opens.
Where your heart is a sun and it shines as it opens.